Alright, so I'm going to go back to the example I showed you last week where you'll see if you look through that video, I did demonstrate some modelling and material setup in Revit, so that's why I didn't use it here and was trying to just show you some different examples. But you'll see if you look through that video I gave you last week that I didn't really demonstrate lighting. I used the light that came from Revit. And now, have I... Sorry, I've forgotten where I saved this. I think I've saved it in a different space. What have I done? Sorry, I've just changed project folders recently and I forgot that I'd done that. So let's see, I'm pretty sure I would have put it here. Yes, there it is. Okay. Okay, so you'll see if you look through the example I showed you last week that, so I'm going to go to wireframe, that I went through the modelling and some of the materials set up for this. Now, I'll probably come back and show you some more of the materials and other things in a little while anyway, but what I really want to show you is the lighting workflow now. And so I'll go into Revit as well and open the same project. So again, got to remember the millions of things I've saved where I've saved this one, and I think I would have put it into here. Yes, I did. That's the family, there's the project. Okay, so this is the same project, or this is the project file I imported into 3D Studio Max. And so here you can see the interior view we were just looking at in Max. There's the basic building model. So still a few issues, but a lot of issues, but it's enough to you know, give me something to start playing around with. So you might remember, I think I did look at the sun settings there. So going to the graphic display options on your shadows button in any view, you can see the sun setting and also the location, also I should say the date and time and location. So that determines your sun orientation. And so there, the date and time and location determine the angle of the shadows coming through here, but also in the render settings, the background, you see it's set to few clouds, that will carry through as well when I export, and any other environmental settings, but they're the main ones. So the sun setting here and the background setting there, the haze as well will have an effect, but we'll look at that later. So in 3D Studio Max, to see this setting, you can see there's a compass there. That's what's called a, well, it is called a compass, but it's actually part of something bigger called a daylight system in 3D Studio Max. So this compass is one part of it. Zooming out here, you can see that the sun, that's it there, that's the other part. Now the sun, or it's actually called the daylight assembly head, it's actually made up of two things. It's got a sun and a sky. And that's important for your lighting because, believe it or not, during the day, it's not just the sun that makes things, that illuminates things, I should say. It's the main light source, but definitely not the only one. The other light source, believe it or not, is the sky. So the sky is a light source. It's not black. Okay, it's blue for a reason, because it actually emits light. It's still coming indirectly from the sun, but you've got the main light rays that come from the sun, but then you've got the diffuse rays that are diffused out into the rest of the atmosphere, and they also light the planet, and it's a light source. Okay, so you need both of those things to get accurate lighting, and so they're actually in this object. You've got the sun, and then the skylight is the sky. Alright, so that is actually from Revit. Like I said, in Revit, it uses mental ray. This is another mental ray thing. You can see there it's an MR sun and an MR sky. So they're both mental ray. So it's coming from Revit with the same settings, but in 3D Studio Max, you see all those settings and you can tweak them and do different things with them. Now, if you bring it in from another program, like AutoCAD or ArchiCAD, any other CAD program, SketchUp even, there's nothing wrong with making your own daylight system in 3D Studio Max, and you can do that here. It's not under lights. It is basically a light, but it's a bit more complex than a normal light. So it's grouped under Systems, which is the last of these options you have on the main Create panel, and so you can make a daylight system there. All right, so. And I might actually just show you how easy it can be, and it'll maybe give you a better idea of the daylight system and how useful it is. So I'm just going to reset, and so I'm going to say no, I don't want to save, yes, I want to reset. So I'm going to make a plane, and the length and the width, I'll make it a little bit bigger than that, so I'll make it, say, 3000 by 3000, 3 meters square. But I'm also going to tick this render multiplier, or change this render multiplier, and I'm going to make that 100. So when it renders, that plane will be 100 times bigger. So it should go to the horizon, basically. Now I'm going to put a basic material onto it. Again, just using those templates, I'll grab a concrete, or actually, no, I'll get a better one. I'll get something from the library. So I'll go to the Autodesk library, because I haven't shown you this very much yet. Autodesk material library here, and I'm going to go down to stone folder, and I'll just grab, say, River Rock. Okay, so we'll see how we go with that one. Alright, so I'm going to drag that onto my plane. Now, it won't do anything special just yet, but I'm going to then put a teapot onto it, just so we've got an object that can render. And this is a really good way of just testing things out. Do a very basic scene like this, and then you can try out different things. So teapots in Max are primitive, if I haven't shown you that already. So it's just on the geometry panel, the first panel in your Create panel, you find teapot, really easy. And it's just the 3D thing. They used to be considered a hard thing to make, so the guys at the company that used to make 3D Studio Max before Autodesk got it said, why not just make it a primitive? And it's just one of those things. It's kind of an Autodesk logo now. They use it for some of their marketing. Oh, sorry, I went to rotate, and then I just clicked on one of these circles. So they're all just different axes. Oh yeah, so on the modify panel, so that's the second panel here. You've got the size. So my radius there is not too bad, about 200 mil, 200-300 mil. But notice how it's a bit faceted. So as well as the size, I want to change the segment. So I'm going to increase that, and that'll make it smoother. So I just increased the segments. So you can just click and drag on those arrows to make things bigger or smaller. And I'll turn edges on so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So with edged faces, it's easier to see. So adding and removing segments there makes it more or less detailed. Okay, so I'll turn the edges off now, and I'll give this another material as well. So I'll just grab, for this one, I'm tempted to use grass, or maybe I'll just use chrome for now, and then I'll change it to something more interesting later. Okay, so at the moment, there's no lights in the scene. So if I render, it should be meant to array. I'll just double check. I'm sure it's meant to array, but let's double check. Yep. So, okay, so I'm just going to click the render button, and pretty average. Now, I can at least tell there that my river rock is going to have some problems anyway, so I'll fix that. I'm just going to select my plane. I'm going to try this option here, and I'm also going to see if I can turn it on. Yep, that's better. But still, it's only going to be marginally better when I render, because I've got materials on my objects, but I don't have any lights in the scene. Lights are critical. Now, in Revit, and a lot of other CAD programs, you can make lights. And they're actually mental ray lights. But I'd recommend you don't worry too much about the lights, for rendering at least, in the CAD programs. And you'll see when you start doing it in 3D software why it's just so much better doing it this way. So now, the one exception is maybe daylight systems. If you import them from Revit, it's as though they've been made in the 3D software anyway. So don't worry if you've got a daylight system. I'm going to make one now. But if you've got one that's been imported from Revit, just use it. They're perfect, and they give you a lot of handy settings. But often you won't get one from Revit. So I'll just make one, show you how to do this. And I'm going to say yes to all these options. So it's asking me if I want to turn on exposure control. This is where a bit of knowledge of photography helps, but we'll look at this more later. So yes, I do want to turn that on. I'm going to click and drag to make my compass, and it's going to ask me, do I want to assign this thing called a MR physical sky? Yes, I want to assign that as well. I'm going to move the mouse now to place the sun. Now, the height of the sun makes no difference. It's purely a graphical symbol used to pick up the sun, just to select it. That's all it's there for. Okay, so I've got a sun now. But what about my position? Just like Revit, you can adjust this. So I'm going to get location, and we don't want North America, we want Australia. And I'll go to Sydney. You can set it wherever you want though, you can even just pick a location. Oh, it's got nearest big city, you can turn that off. Okay, so I will go to Sydney though, because I know what the sun should do here. Alright, so then you can change the date and the time, just like Revit. It's basically this routine, believe it or not, started in this program and then they put into Revit. Okay, so now I want to change my display, just like I did before. I'm going to turn lights and shadows on. So in the viewport, I'm going to go to this right-click menu, enable hardware shading, which lets me turn on options like enable shadows, but it's gone a bit dark there. So I'll have a look at the reason for that in a moment, but I've got illuminate with scene lights, that's okay. I'm going to also turn on my background. So down here, viewport background, yes, I want to display, and I'm going to use the environment background. Okay, so that's getting better, but I still want to make some adjustments. First, I'm going to just change my view slightly and show you that there is a sky now. And believe it or not, we'll even see the sun. Now, sun in the southern hemisphere obviously comes mainly from the north. So, rotating this around, you can see there's my sun. But watch what happens if I bring that down. So, but basically to do that, I'm going to change the time to, yep, the sky color changes. And if you've got the right view angle, you'll actually see the sun. All in the viewport, this is all in real time. So no rendering here yet. Right, but that's not going to be a fantastic render, probably. Let's just have a look. We'll see. It's going to be fairly dark because the sun's on the other side of the pot, but it won't be completely dark. Just want to make sure I've got my, yep, got final gather on. Let's make this a bit bigger. So already, without really doing anything, the render is much, much better. And that's with a terrible viewing angle. I'm doing one of the big no-nos, which is to look straight at the sun. Generally, with in photography, you want the light source behind. It'll still be at an angle, but you don't want it in front of the thing you're photographing. So, or your camera. So, even though it's not too bad, the lighting there, and that's all automatic because of the way 3D Studio Max does things. If I bring it around so the sun's behind me, it should be better still. But notice it's quite early, so I'm going to bring the time up. So I mean, early is generally good, but not too early. So notice how I've got the shadows there as a guide, but my plane there is not looking too great. I'm just going to go and change one last setting. I'm going to go back to this one and make sure. Oh no, that's okay. So, grass, yeah, I'll do grass. Yep, I'll give that a go in a second. Now, to make it like real grass, it'll take a long time to render. But you can do that. So you've got a thing called a hair and fur modifier. But you can see there how much better the lighting is. That's something that would take quite a while to set up in a CAD program. So as I get the angle right, it's going to just get better and better. So again, that's all fairly automatic. It's possible in Revit, but it's just harder to set it up. You get less feedback, much less responsive, and in Revit, all the settings aren't easy to get to. So I'll show you some artificial lights in that other scene that I have. I'm just going to close this. I don't need this one anymore, so I'll just reset. And no, I don't care about saving changes. Yes, and I'll go back to that file I was just showing you. Don't think I need that now. Now, I'll just check that this is the one that has the render setup done. I think it may not be. Oh yes, okay, so I've got a basic render set up there, but it's quite dark here still. And if I didn't have very much of an opening here, then it would be quite dark there. But with artificial lighting, obviously, we'll probably be fine. So in Revit, I'm sure you all know, you can add lights. If I put a ceiling in there, then I can make lights fairly easily. And I'm sure most of you know, if you've done this in Revit, when you go to Component, Load Family, probably it's best to go to International Metric Library and get to the Lighting Fixtures folder there, and you've got these basic lights you can load in. So this one, for example, downlight recess can or downlight spot. Now, you need a ceiling. It won't let me place this now because I don't have a ceiling there. You've got them in Revit, and so I'll just say no, I don't care about the tags. So if I had a ceiling, what level am I on? Level 2, so I'll go to level 2 ceiling plan. And yeah, I think that's the right level where my camera is. So I can put a ceiling in there, and I'll just do a very basic one. Just so you can get the basic idea why it's still useful to do it in a program like this. So I just got a very simple ceiling there, just a rectangle, so I can do it quickly. And then now you'll see if I go to place my light, there we are, it's letting me place it. And now, so I'm going to go to wireframe because I do want to follow my floor. So I can place a few lights in here. And edit the boundary to bring that back to the shape of the floor as well. Oh, is that a spline? Please don't be a spline. It is. Okay, so I'll use trim instead. So yeah, even trim doesn't work here. Yeah, splines can be a bit fiddly. I'll just do it a different way. So, I mean, I know I can get that edge, but I'll just do it in a quicker way by tracing it with arcs. Just so I don't waste too much time on this. There we go. So that'll be close enough, and now I can trim to my ceiling. I'll fill in the rest of the ceiling later, but for now that'll give me enough to place my lights. And so back in the 3D view, you can see there's the ceiling. It's a bit low at the moment, but my lights are there. I'll have a look in the section, and you can see that the ceiling is quite a way below this floor, but that's not difficult to change. And so the lights being hosted by the ceiling will go with it. Now it's kind of nice that the lights have mental ray lights built into them, but that's really just a nice bonus. The main advantage of this is that I get my ceiling plans generated automatically, and those can be tagged and put into, you know, schedules of quantities and things like that, all within Revit. But, like I said, it does also give me the mental ray lights built in to those. So I'll just show you. If I go and do again what I did last week, export an FBX file. Now, notice how it won't let me do it from here. It's because it's a plan. So I've got to go to my 3D view. Now, I know you may not see them there on the projector screen, so I'll just change the display here to hidden line, just to prove to you that the lights are there. There they are. In fact, maybe what I'll do also, before I export, I'll bring the ceiling down this way so that in that view at least it looks reasonable. So let's bring this down. That may be enough. Not quite. But it'll do. I'll live with it. So back in my plan, I can get some more lights. That's all I want. So I'm just using copy to make some extra lights there. Something like this. Just roughly following that curve. There we are. So now when I export this again, I'll just save it first, and then I'm going to export again into... Oh yeah, oh, absolutely, yep, yep. I'm just using this because there's less chance of them going into the floor above. So I'm going to export my FBX file and overwrite the one that I made last time. Okay, and so now in 3D Studio Max, I can go to my File Link Manager under References, and then on the Files tab here, you can see the one I loaded last week. I'm just going to click Reload there. I don't even need to browse again. Reload, it knows. So it'll just take a minute. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So if I wanted to do the ceiling over that whole level, I probably would do that. But I'm going to change that floor anyway, so it's no point doing it too accurately. Okay, so now it's reloaded, and so you can see there are my lights. Now they're mental ray lights, but I don't know what they are because I didn't make them. I didn't make this family. Now let's have a look and see. Okay, so it's a free light, which is a kind of photometric light, and it's using a light distribution to get a spot effect, and it's probably got a web file associated with it, does it? No, it's just got a spotlight distribution and a point emission. Okay, so yeah, that's all been set up by the person who made this in Revit, and the options in Revit are a little bit less than what you get in 3D Studio Max, but still, this will do something. So let's just see if I've got my illumination by scene lights. Yes, I do. But I'll check my render exposure now. Oops, sorry, under here, exposure control. And so this was based on a render with just sunlight. So sorry, I've got a material there that's causing a problem. Probably should fix that. Okay, so you can see there, the sun's doing a reasonable job, but the other lights aren't really doing much. Because again, I didn't make them, I don't know what they're doing exactly. It's better than it was before, but still it's not great. So I'll just show you, if I do the render, so I'll fix that plate material in a minute, but for now, you can see the sun is doing a lot, but these other lights, you can barely tell that they're on. And that's often the case with lights that you bring in that have been made by other people. You've kind of got to guess how they're done anyway, so you're often better off, if you don't need them on a reflected ceiling plan or something in Revit, just to leave it until you get into 3D Studio Max, where it's easy to make any kind of light you want, and you've got total control over the settings. And lighting is tricky. You'll spend a lot of time adjusting and fine-tuning the lights. Getting good renders is largely about getting the light right, getting the lighting right. That's the real art with rendering. And you don't need that many lights. I mean, some scenes I do have a lot of lights. Some scenes I'll have 80 or so lights, but quite often you can get by with 10, 20 lights, but they've got to be right. And so you've really got to be able to tweak all the settings. So I'll show you that. Instead of these silly lights from Revit, I'm going to basically make something that's not far off, but in Max, where I know what I'm getting basically. And so now let's see. They're all.
Do you model it yourself, or is it just actual light output you change?
No, I'll make them myself. Yeah, from scratch. So, I mean, here, if I was happy to use a free light, which is, like I said, it's a certain kind of light, I could just change the settings, but I don't want that kind of light. So I'm going to delete all of these. And so I'll just use a trick to select them all. Just like in Revit, you've got something that selects similar. So select similar in Max, just like select all instances in Revit. Yeah, well, the light fixture is a separate thing. So that stays. I want that. I just don't want the actual light source, the emitter, the thing that emits and illuminates the scene. So I'll turn my grid off here. So I do want the fixture. I'm happy to have that, and that helps me to know where my lights were as well. So I can go and make a light now using the kind I want, which is a MR area spot, certain kind of light, and I'm just going to click and drag to set a couple of points, and now I'm going to go and in a different viewport, first I'm going to set the height. Now notice how here it's starting to get a bit hard to see because it's all dark. When the light's there it won't be as bad, but for now it's quite dark. So I'm going to go to flat and illuminate with default lights, and I'm also going to turn off hardware shading. So it's just giving me a smooth, unlit display. Okay, and so then I'm going to, now my right click menu is playing up, so I'll use the button on the main toolbar here, the move button. Gives me the XYZ gizmos. I can drag my spotlight up in the air until it's about the height my other lights were. And remember the old rule, if it looks right, it is right. Don't get too fussy with you know, getting things exactly in the right position. That'll probably do for now until I have a close look at that geometry. And then the target is still down on the ground. Now, rather than spending half an hour trying to click on it, a nice option you have with lights and cameras in Max is to right click, and you always have the option to select light target. So I can bring it up now, and then zooming in there, I can tell it's on the right story because I can see the door there. Turn the grid off again, and that's good enough, really. But then over here you can see that the target isn't directly under the light. So I'm going to bring it across, and you can see that's pretty well straight underneath now. Now I'm going to right click one more time, and you can see I've got the option with the target selected to select the light. So that means I can go over to the modify panel and I've got all the lights settings. So now I'm going to set my display back to yeah, exactly, that's right. So I want to copy it for all these others. So I'm going to I'll just change the filter up here. You can see this has got all. I'm going to change that to lights, and now I can make a window, and you can see it's telling me I've got one light selected, but I've got both the target and the light source. Just makes it easier to copy it. So I'm going to do a series of copies now. Yeah, so with move, I'm going to hold down Shift and click and drag on the little yellow square there between X and Y, and that means it'll move in both. And just by eye, I'll line that up. So I'm going to use instance there, and then I'll just keep copying to get all the others. Notice I haven't really set the brightness or anything like that yet, but because these are instances, when I change one, it'll change them all. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with redoing the lights in Max. It takes a little bit longer at first, but in the long run it gives you much more control, which means it's going to make everything much easier. Oh, you can get it to snap, but in this case it's fine just to line it up by eye. But yeah, you can definitely snap. Alright, so now I'm going to change the display back to hardware, and smooth and highlights, and illuminate with scene lights. But you can see it's still not showing me much. Part of that is the brightness of the lights, but part of it is also the exposure. So back here under rendering, exposure control, I'm going to use a preset. I'm going to go to physically based lighting, indoor daylight. I think it was pretty close to that anyway. I just wanted to make sure. Right, so that should be the right exposure for this kind of scene, but my light still is quite dim. This is often a problem when you use artificial lights and sunlight together. The nice thing about this kind of light though is that it's easy to increase the brightness beyond what would be realistic, so you don't need to worry about being technically correct. You just want it to look the way you want it to look. So increasing the multiply here, it's quite high, but that's okay. This might be higher than I really want, but we'll see when we render. So 74, that's could be okay. We'll have to just render and find out. And also I can try different things like the spotlight parameters, where I can adjust the hotspot and the fall off angle to get a softer edge to the lighting. Now I know it probably looks fairly dark on the screen up there, but you'll see when I render that should be quite a bit brighter. Again, I've got to fix that material. I'll do that in a minute. Okay, so it's just going through the bounce lighting, and then it'll render. So yeah, still a bit dim. We can definitely see the light now at least, and so I'll cancel that. And so that error I should just sort out first. So I'll do that now. Okay, so I'll just find that material's here. There it is. Okay, that's a bit weird. I mean, this material probably isn't really being used by anything important, but just for the sake of it, I'll keep the yeah, it's annoying, that material. I'll keep the same map, so I'm just going to bring that across to a new material. And then ditch this annoying plate material altogether, because you can see it just keeps giving me errors. So let's get rid of it. There we are, and totally get rid of that. Now it should be gone from the scene now. So even before I change the lights, I'll just re-render. And now we should get no more of those annoying errors. Photon emission can take a second, but it's worth having it here. Okay, there we are. Now, I probably need to take the exposure down anyway. I do want it to be a little bit brighter than that. Not too much though. Okay, so I'll cancel this. But you definitely want to balance out the exposure with the lighting. And okay, so if I take that that value down there, maybe 8 or 9. See how it goes. And that's going to make all the lighting brighter. And then you probably don't want to change the brightness of the sun. So that's what I'm looking at there when I'm adjusting the exposure. And then based on that, I can adjust my artificial lights. So you can see hopefully why it's worth doing this in the 3D program, because you've got to do quite a lot of adjusting. And if you just rely on the way it comes in from a program like Revit, even though Revit is going to give you things that no other CAD program can, it's still maybe not enough. So now I've got those lights. Oh, the sunlight, probably at the brightness I want. Maybe it's a little bit too bright, but I'll just leave it at that for now. And then close all this stuff. So now I can bring up this artificial light. So there does need quite a high multiplier. Now the hardware on my computer is starting to get a bit overloaded. It should refresh that any minute. I don't know why it's not yet, but well, maybe I'll just go ahead and render anyway. Might take that long to show me in the viewport. Okay, so I've got an error caused by the photons. Now, it's not, I think it's just because my, yeah, my computer's running out of resources because I've got several programs running at once. Yeah, it's, oh, sorry, I went into isolation mode. I didn't realise that's all it was. Okay, so that's fairly simple. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any shape you want. Yeah, no problem. So that's just a simple example. So at the moment, it's got a fairly narrow cone. Even with this light, I can adjust the cone. So I'll bring out the fall off and give an even wider cone. But you've got total control. I mean, this is a disc-based light. You've got plane-based lights, all sorts of lights. Any shape you can think of, really, you can do. And also, I'll make the size different, and maybe I should also make that floor material, because at the moment the floor material's affecting the light in a negative way. Yeah, it's not a great material, so I'll just grab something better. So even just that default timber, yeah. So let's go for, say, satin. So there, I'm just going to get my mapping right. Yeah, sure. So this thing called mapping. So I've got UVW mapping I've just added there. And now I can have a look at my map size. So that's the map that this is based on. It's a just a JPEG. So I'm going to turn on real world map size there. Notice I turned it on over here as well. And I'm going to change the size to, I know that one probably works pretty well with the width at 1200 and the height at about 2400. And so I'll just go across to the other maps. Yep, that one's okay. That's a parametric map, different kind of map, but this one, that's fine. Okay, now it should show, but I might just reactivate it now. Yep. Yeah.
To choose the actual lights that you end up specifying.
Oh yeah, yeah. Look, there are templates, but that's using real-world lighting, which I mean you can do. So I'll just quickly show you where it is. So you've got here these ones I mentioned before, photometric lights, which sometimes are worth it, but to get light to work in a physically accurate way can be really technical.
Yeah.
So I'll just show you that. You've got it. So if I make, say, this target light, you've got all these basic templates which are based on real-world lights.
Oh, yeah.
And then when you get right into it, you'll see there are even more involved techniques like using a photometric IES file. And so this is something put together by the Illumination Engineering Society, and they're hardcore electrical engineers who do everything in a really technical way. But this comes with 3D Studio Max all built in, and so you've got in here Autodesk 2011. There is. Oh, where do they bury it now? I think in defaults. Is it there? It's one of these folders anyway. You've got an IES folder. Yep, there it is. Oh, now there's a lot more than this, but this is just some of them. So we've got, say, a sconce distribution or a wall wash distribution, and it's much more complex than you might realise because the distribution is really quite mathematically complicated when you get right into it. But yeah, you can do all of that. I'll put this one in. So that's a wall washer. I'll stick it over near the wall. And I mean, these work really well on their own. When you start using them with a sun, that's when it gets pretty hard because try and think about taking a photo during the day with the lights on. The lights don't do much.
Yeah.
Because the sun is just thousands and thousands of times brighter than any man-made light source. So anyhow, I will show you this one photometric light, and
Yeah, because I've worked on a couple of projects where we had to get, like, it was the requirement to have a lighting engineer sort of do his thing.
Oh, look, you can do it, but look, it makes you realise why there are specialists who take care of those things. But so anyhow, there you've got a photometric light, and I'll do a few duplicates of it just so you can see it. It'll work pretty well. Okay, now I forgot to come back and check the size of my timber, but it'll be pretty close. I'll probably just need to fine tune it because I didn't check my mapping. But the lighting there you can see is already much more balanced. Yeah, it's always funny. The projector makes things more orange. Obviously, I can compensate for that, but it is a lot more orange. And the timber is not the right size there because my mapping is a bit strange. I just want to check my units. I think there's something funny happening.
I thought it actually exceeded 4.
Oh yeah, look, it should be floorboards. It's coming in huge, and I'll just check that because there's something funny happening with my scaling. I haven't really been looking at that, but okay. So I'm just going to check my. Which way? Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. Yep, yep. Anything like that, you can change, no problem. Okay, my scale's okay. So let's just see what's happening with the floorboards there. There's got to be something that's causing that. So I'll isolate that and let's have a look at it. So there are my floors, and you can see there the texture on them. So there, and my railing's part of the floor, so it's got that too, but I'll take that out afterwards. Yeah, so really funny things going on with my scaling. Uh, so I, I, I think I know why it's happening, but let's say basically it's working in inches. So I'm going to have to guesstimate this. So let's try 100, 200. Yeah, that's about right. Maybe a little bit too big. So let's try 50 by 100. Now, normally you shouldn't have to do this, but I just want to get it done. So now you can get the camera there, and okay, so I'll go and render again. Yeah, they'll be much better now. That the scale was just right out before. Now, should normally render much faster than this, but sorry. But here I've just got quite a few programs running. Okay, so unfortunately I've got the edge of my ceiling, but other than that, I've got the floorboards coming through, the right size, and most importantly, the lighting. And I can see that the artificial man-made lights are doing something quite clearly, as well as the sun doing something. And that's something that's quite hard to achieve in Revit. Give it a go. See how you go. It's not an easy thing. Oh, that's to do with the render quality. So the render quality. So this sort of reflection, that's called a diffuse glossy reflection. Yeah, it's all to do with the so the glossy reflections here. That's the main quality setting that affects it. There are some tricks you can use in the material. I'll just quickly cancel that. Okay, so this kind of material is known to cause those problems. So you've actually got an option there to use fast glossies, which basically will improve the speed. So it's not as good quality when you increase the overall render settings, but for this sort of thing, it's generally faster and better for low quality renders. All right, so that smoothed it out quite a bit without really slowing down the render time. All right, so doing the lighting here is definitely easier than in any CAD program, but even like I said, Revit probably is one of the best for lighting still. But 3D programs generally going to give you much more control. And so I've just put that note there about importing the sun and sky settings from CAD programs because Revit actually does a pretty good job with that, the daylight system. But the rest, forget it. Just do it in the 3D program. The rendering software as well needs to be thought about because it's going to determine the lighting options. I'm going to be focusing on mental ray, so all of those lighting tools we'll be able to use, from the photometric lights to the MR lights, which are really good, as well as the old standard 3D Studio Max lights. But say if I was using V-Ray, it'd be a different set of lights. Again, Maxwell uses materials for lights. You don't even have lights in Maxwell. You have different kinds of materials, and some materials are bright and some are not. So, something with those lights. Anyhow, that's probably the main consideration with rendering. Actually, the main reason people choose one rendering program over another is often, especially when you get right into it, it's often going to be the lights. That's why I chose V-Ray, because it has such excellent lights. They're really good. Mental Ray's not bad though. It's got pretty good lights, great materials. The big strength of Mental Ray is its shaders, or materials in general. Okay, so then you've got post-production software, and it can be used to add lighting effects. So again, go back and have a look at that video I've given you, or the link I've given you to the video showing the Alex Roman work, where you'll see him doing lighting effects in After Effects, added to animation. Really good approach. You can do it in Photoshop as well, I know, but it's not as good as doing it in a compositing program. It's okay. Has anyone tried the 3D stuff in Photoshop? Yeah. Oh, it's been in there for a couple of, I think 2 releases now. They've had. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's nice to have, but you don't need it. But you can do some kind of interesting things, but nothing compared to what compositing software can do. So I'll show you more of those things as we get onto those programs. But it's just important to realise that you can do a lot of touching up in those programs, and lighting is one of the things that you can modify a little bit, but it's not really 3D lighting. Right, so then you've got animation. Now, because we're probably going to run short on time if I go right through this tonight, I'm tempted to push that back until next week, because you won't need to spend as much time looking at animation tools for your research project as you will some of the other things I've been focusing on. Just remember what I mentioned briefly before. CAD programs are terrible for animation. They're really not designed for it. So I haven't even listed them here. 3D software, on the other hand, is generally good, but I'll give you a tip for your research. 3D Studio Max is probably one of the best for animation. There's another program that's maybe slightly has an edge, but only slightly. I'd say it's actually debatable, personally, because I know how to animate pretty well in both of them. But according to common perceptions, I don't know. You maybe don't know the program I'm trying to hint. What's the biggest 3D program in film and other work like that? You say Maya? Yeah. Yeah, Maya, definitely. Okay, so if you talk to a real 3D specialist, chances are they'll be using Maya. It's definitely the biggest program in film production. Every Pixar movie is done almost entirely using basically customized versions of Maya. All the other big productions are mainly done with Maya. But you probably also know that Maya is an Autodesk program now, and there's a lot of crossover between the two, and between 3ds Max and Maya, and another one, Softimage, which was another really high-end program, and still is, but it's now again Autodesk. So there's a lot of convergence between those programs. For animation, Maya has some advanced tools because it's used for film and animation work at a really high level. But also you've got Motion Builder, and it's relied on Motion Builder for a long time. 3ds Max, on the other hand, has a lot of integrated animation tools, and it's better than, by far better than any other CAD program or any CAD program, but also most other 3D programs. So some of the others, and this will again help you with your project: Lightwave, Rhino, SolidWorks, obviously SketchUp, which is useless. Just off the top of my head, they're the ones I can think of. I mentioned TrueSpace is absolute rubbish. But Lightwave's a good program. Rhino's a good program. So is SolidWorks. They're all good 3D programs, but they're not great animation programs. 3D Studio Max and Maya, on the other hand, are. And Softimage is pretty good as well. Houdini is another one that is amazing for animation. Yeah, if you know someone who uses Houdini. Sorry? Oh, I thought you said you've heard of Houdini. Yeah, and if you... Yeah, if you know someone who uses it, get them to show you. Because because it's one of those real eye-opening programs. You'd be surprised. Ah, well, yeah.
Until October.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Well, you never know. You might do more 3D after this, and it all helps. Houdini's great, really, and it's hard to get hold of. Yeah. No, a lot of people mention it to brag because it's one of those programs that is really, useful if you know it. So, yeah, a lot of people brag about knowing it because.
A lot of people mention it to Brad, and I'm like,
No.
I don't know he was in charge of buying programs.
Well, look, that used to be my name for any IT guy. We had a guy working in there for about 3 years, and I just kept calling him Brad. And after about 3 years, he just said, I'm David. And I still see him all the time. He's a senior manager here now, but there you go. So, have a look at the different software, what they can do, but I've chosen 3D Studio Max for a reason to focus on. Partly for the animation tools, and I'll maybe demonstrate those to you later though, because I don't want to run out of time tonight. So rendering software doesn't have a huge impact on the animation options, but it does affect the way that you render it out. And the big keyword there is indirect illumination. So the way that you store bounce lighting is heavily impacted by the rendering software that you use, and that all is important when you render animation. Post-production software, it's mainly to do with the editing of the animation and the way it's tied together. But again, I'll demonstrate that when I actually demonstrate some animation for you. So, same with presentation. So, you're probably familiar with some of these approaches anyway. So, graphics software, I'm sure you know all those programs, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign being the main ones. So pulling together all the work that you've generated for your presentations can be done using those programs for layouts. But for digital presentations, they're quite limited. So they're not going to give you animation, for example. So for that, you have compositing software, video editing software, and you can also use those to tie together still images into a complete digital presentation. Then to present to an audience, you often need some additional presentation software like the ones I've mentioned. Acrobat and PowerPoint programs like that. Right, so I will come back and go over those last two slides in more detail later on, but I just wanted to make sure I got to this tonight and had time to set it recording. So the main requirements there are explained in more detail in the brief. Obviously, the brief, I think I've got 4 pages or something in there in the end, or did I not? Yeah, so it's 4 pages of information on the project. It's obviously all important, and you need to make sure you read through that. But I sort of just point out some extra things I didn't get to put into the brief that you need to think about. I suppose it's just tips as well on the things I'm going to be looking at when I'm marking. So the first thing is to make sure you have reasonable research skills and you know how to evaluate the different sources that you'll be coming across. You're researching technology, the software principally, so most of your sources are going to be online probably. You'll find probably some print sources. If I was doing this, I've got probably dozens of books on this stuff, so I would have a lot of print sources, but you won't find very many books on these programs in the library or something. So unless you're willing to go out and buy some books, probably most of the sources will be online. Magazines are good as well. Don't forget there are specialist 3D magazines as well as, I don't know, any of you look at different sort of technology related magazines for design? Or heard of any? There are even CAD magazines, boring as it sounds.
I read like design, not computer.
Yeah, see, the design magazines have a little bit of information on the technology, but it's normally, here and there and not very much and not very good quality. So for the technology, you need to, use the specialist resources. And there are CAD magazines, but the ones you can buy in shops are absolute rubbish, I'll tell you that right now. They're not even going to talk about things at a high level. Online, there are some pretty good ones, but CAD is a different world to design and design-related technology. So you've got much more high-end resources for things like 3D in particular. So there are some really good 3D magazines. 3D World, for example, is really good. That can be a good source. Just to get an idea and get familiar with the software. You don't need to read all the articles that they put out, because a lot of it will be for software you'll never need. But have a look anyway. You'll see online there are lots of magazines like that, and you can buy them. They've actually got, 3D World up in the newsagent, and it's a good resource. Sometimes better than getting books, because the books go out of date really quickly, they're expensive, and they're normally just for one program. So the magazines are a good starting point to just familiarise yourselves with the programs. And like I said, online sometimes is fine for those things. And you've got plenty of blogs and other things, but avoid the ones that are too biased. And I know it's hard to know which ones are biased and which ones aren't, but obviously the manufacturers' sites, they're not always completely biased. I mean, you'll find some good resources on the manufacturer's sites, but if you go to the Graphisoft forum and you read a bunch of guys bagging out Revit because they love ArchiCAD, chances are it's not an objective opinion, and chances are they don't even know what they're talking about because they've never used Revit. And the same if you go to the Autodesk blogs and see them saying the same thing about ArchiCAD. Even though, to be honest, I've actually used both, and the guys who on the Graphisoft site go for sometimes page after page after page. That's why I'm mentioning it. There's about 50 pages of blogs on this is the guys who make ArchiCAD on their official site, just saying that Revit's rubbish and it's years behind ArchiCAD and all this stuff that's just totally untrue. It's actually the opposite in terms of any field you can mention. Revit is technologically a long way past what ArchiCAD can do. But you know, if you just go and read that, it's easy to get the wrong idea. So just watch out for the guys who
Forums are interesting.
yeah
It's like just everyone using.
yeah
Young age,
yeah yeah.
it's really fun.
But you know, it's good, still good to read it. But you just got to remember that half of them don't know what they're talking about. But some do. You occasionally find people who really do know what they're talking about, and you've got to learn how to evaluate things. And the best way is to be already familiar with the software a little bit, and actually try them out. Also, try and find more objective reviews. So in the the trade journals and things like that, you will find pretty unbiased comparisons. And then when you go to those blogs and things, you can still get useful information and get an idea. Who knows? Who knows what? So on top of that, you've got the I suppose the project requirements. So that's going to be dependent on the type of presentation and the type of design that you're going to be presenting. So, so before I get onto that, just to mention here that you do need to have a good understanding of the different kinds of software, not just in some of the fields, but all the ones I've mentioned here. So we're mentioning mainly the CAD programs. So, well, I know, just give me an idea. What do you reckon some of the CAD programs you should at least have heard about and have a bit of an idea about would be? Yeah, AutoCAD definitely. Vectorworks definitely. ArchiCAD absolutely. Revit obviously. I'd even count SketchUp because it can do some CAD type things.
You don't have to know all of these things.
No. They'd be the main ones. There are others, but MicroStation definitely, and there are different versions of MicroStation you should know about. There are different versions of AutoCAD you probably should know about as well.
In the assessment, do we
Architectural
have
desktop.
all of these?
Yeah, well, it's gone now.
In the assessment,
Architectural Desktop's still around. That's a version of AutoCAD.
do we have to review all of these different programs in every single paragraph?
Not in depth, but you should mention, the most popular ones, and the most, if they're maybe, you could also mention some if they're not hugely popular that are, more advanced or doing things in a new way, as well. But yeah, mainly the most widely used ones is what you want to focus on. So all of those ones I just mentioned, you probably want to mention all those CAD programs, and just their their basic strengths and weaknesses and why one can do things and another one can't, things like that.
And that program that you've been using, is it 3ds Max?
Yeah,
What's the difference between that 3ds Max design?
nothing much as far as what we'll be doing. There's no difference.
So don't have Max.
I'd probably get design just because later on you might want the lighting analysis tool. We're not going to use it.
And does that do as good as animation?
Oh, it's exactly the same.
Oh,
Yeah. It's the same program. They just have one tool in design that you don't get with 3ds Max on its own, but the trade-off is the software development kit, which is for programmers. So unless you want to do programming, I'd be going with 3ds Max design.
when we get to the animation section of that project, we'll
Yep.
be using 3ds Max.
Yeah, no, 3D Studio Max mainly, and then stitching it together with other programs afterwards, but all the animation in 3D in 3D Studio Max. So that's one field. So CAD, you need to know, a wide range of programs. 3D programs, what do you reckon would be some of the popular 3D programs? Maya, definitely. 3D Studio Max, definitely. And, I count Design and Max as the same programs. But there are plenty of others. Well, that's a rendering program, but that's definitely one I'd mention with rendering. Have you heard of Cinema 4D? That's a really popular one. Lightwave, I mentioned before. Rhino, another popular one I mentioned. Yep. So especially if you're thinking about doing architecture after this. That's one you'll definitely use. I mentioned Maya. SolidWorks is another popular one. Softimage is another one. There are plenty of 3D programs. Houdini I mentioned. You don't need to review all of those, but they're just some you could comment on, and if you get a bit of an idea of the capabilities and why some are strong in certain fields and others are strong in others. I'll give you a tip. There's an obvious reason why Rhino is popular in architecture and not in film and animation.
Do you mean 3D? Like Atlantis doing what?
No, it's a rendering program. It works within 3D, but so rendering programs I'd consider separately. So yeah. So rendering, you'd have programs like Mental Ray we've looked at, V-Ray I've touched on, but then Atlantis definitely. Maxwell I've mentioned. RenderMan is another one. And yeah, if you just do searches online, you'll find tons of these. Final Render, another one. Brazil, another one. There are tons. Compositing programs. So again, just top of my head, Shake. It's not as popular anymore because Apple are discontinuing it, but it's still around. Nuke, another one. That's what they teach down in the 3D section. Great program actually. Autodesk Composite, that's what I use. After Effects, another one. Toxic is what Autodesk Composite used to be called. Combustion, another popular one. So lots of compositing programs around. You don't need to be expert with all of those, and that's probably the one I expect the least information on because it's probably the one you'll use the least, and also it's the least relevant to the sort of work you'll be doing, and it can get very technical and a bit dry and not interesting. So yeah, definitely put something in about it, but you don't need to put as much work as in the CAD, 3D and rendering programs. Video editing. So I mentioned a few of those before. What did I mention? The one we're going to be using, Premiere. Even iMovie is all right. Windows Live Movie Maker, which is basically a better version of the old Movie Maker. It's okay, but they're kind of entry-level ones. For the more professional work, Final Cut, that's the big one by far. They're probably the main ones. And then presentation software. So do a bit of research there. You might be able to surprise me and find some that I don't know, because I tend to rely on Acrobat and PowerPoint, like I'm doing tonight. But also Director is one that I've used in the past. So they're really the only ones I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are more. You know, they're probably the ones I'd be looking at a minimum. And then what you really want to be thinking about as you do the second part of the project is how it relates to your project, how it relates to your design and the concept you've got for the presentation. So not only the strengths of those programs on their own, but how the strengths and weaknesses can help you with what the work you need to do, basically. So always bear that in mind, because that's really what the second part of the report's all about. So it's all in the brief, but I just wanted to emphasise those things. And it's all about having a clear concept when you're doing the second part of the report particularly. So you want a clear concept in mind, and then a clear plan of how you're going to achieve the final presentation using the tools that you've previously advocated in the report. Okay, so I'll stop recording there. I can go on and give you some more demos on Macs, but I want to make sure you've got a chance of getting this video tonight. So I just want to stop the recording. It was a lot